there's some processes that happen in EMDR therapies that, the therapist will have you rate the level of trauma of a particular experience. And some experiences that the general public might hear about, might think are extremely traumatic, to me or to the next person might not feel that traumatic because it was just so normal at the time, or has so long ago that enough time passed or enough forgiveness happened that it doesn't feel traumatic anymore. But something else in the now might feel extremely traumatic, and it might just be something like an argument, a small argument, or a comment, and that might be re-triggering from so many other things.
Hello, and welcome back to Journey of a Fearless Female. I am your host, Paola Rosser, and this week my guest is a business consultant and executive coach, Kari Schneider. She empowers achievers to optimize performance. Kari and her team specialize in leadership development and culture creation when consulting for the senior leaders of medium to large size companies. She coaches self-mastery for leaders who want to be in the best order in order to give their best. Kari is passionate about using her background in high performance sports to elevate leaders in life and business. She believes that when leaders thrive, the ripple effect for those they serve is powerful. Today, The Empowered is an online consulting company and group coaching membership with collective of coaches who specialize in self-mastery, leadership, and culture creation for small to mid-sized businesses, individual achievers, and she loves nature, animals, racing, and is passionate about living a vibrant and full and adventurous life. Everybody, please welcome Kari. Hi.
Hi, I should have given a shorter bio. I don't know if I did that or my sister. I was like, well,
all bios are welcome. It's funny because people always say, "Oh, I don't know what to say about myself," and then they're like, "Wait, I said too much about myself."
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
never a really good answer. It's just like we're introducing you to the audience. I'm so happy to have you here. We were talking earlier. How did we get connected? Because I have so many people signing up ever since I dropped that TikTok. Like, I need help. I need guests, and I actually know her through a group that we're both a part of, the Platinum Sisters. We were in Tony Robbins events together. I don't know if we've ever met each other, but I did Tony Robbins in 2018 through 2020. And I love anyone who's a part of that community because I feel like we share a special bond. If you survived the Tony events,
Oh my gosh.
right?
Yeah. And we might have been at Life Wealth Mastery in 2019 together.
Ooh,
We might have been at UPW in New
yeah.
Jersey. We might have been at Date with Destiny in 2019, December
Yes. Actually, I
2019.
was at that one.
So was
I got
I.
I got
So was
sick
I.
and I thought I got the worst flu. Everybody was like, "Oh, it's the Tony flu. It's the Tony flu." And then like everything shut down in 2020 and I was like, "No,
Yeah.
I think I had COVID."
Yeah. Yeah. We just didn't know it yet.
We didn't know what it
No.
was.
Yeah, so I think we've crossed paths in person, but we have such a tight community. It's such a cool
Yeah.
thing. So it's amazing. And thank you for having me on, Paola. This is what you're doing. A podcast like this, I think, is exactly what women need to draw from, and people in general, because overcoming what we overcome is what creates the magic in us. It's what creates the strength in us. So I think that this is really powerful. So thank you for doing this, and thank you for having me on.
Well, I'm excited to hear your story. So let's start. Where did your fearless female journey begin?
You know what? I could start in a lot of different places because um, it wasn't just a one thing that was overcome. There were a number of things that had to be overcome in order for me to thrive. And but I can say this: when my parents immigrated from the US to Canada, we literally were living in a house that had no running water and no electricity and was in the bush. So that is a thing in and of itself. And, I had some traumas as a young child, traumas as a young teen. And I'm sure many women have gone through things like this. I'm not going to go deeply into those, but I am going to start at this point. I'm going to start in my late 20s. In my late 20s, I had my dream job. Like, I had my dream job. I was working at what's called the Canadian Sport Institute in Canada. And there are a few of them. There are less than 6 of them across the country. And I was in charge of strength and conditioning for the best of the best athletes in Canada, our Canadian Olympic volleyball teams, triathletes, swimmers. And then if I wasn't working with them directly, I had other contracted people to come in and work with them. And so on the outside, I was also finishing my master's of science degree. Things looked really good. I had this managerial role, a salaried position. I was working with the best in the entire world.
Mm-hmm.
So it was fabulous. And yet, what was really going on was something that was a little more challenging. And it was that behind the scenes, I had just left my daughter's father, and she was 2 years old. And he was literally stalking me everywhere I went.
Ooh.
And no one knew. I didn't have family in the city that I lived in. I didn't have, I was basically working or momming all the time because I didn't have extra childcare. I didn't have extra community. And so what ended up happening was I went to my doctor. My doctor at one point, I said how tired I was. I said how challenging things were. And at one point, my doctor looked at me and she said, I want you to answer these few questions. And so I did. It was just this little form. And you got to think at this point, I am an expert in high performance. I'm an expert in exercise physiology. I'm doing research in biomechanics. I've done research in heart rate variability. Like, I know things to the nth degree for performance, and I'm helping high performance athletes. And the doctor says to me, well, just answer these questions. And I answer them. And I hand it back to her, and she looks at me and says, so based on what you've answered, you are depressed. And I'm like, I'm not depressed.
Yeah.
Not me. I'm the go-getter. I'm the do all the things. I'm the strong one. I'm the get everything done. And she said, she also didn't know what was going on, because what was happening was I was constantly under a load. I was providing for my child and myself, paying the bills. And yet my ex was driving by my house every half an hour. Anywhere I drove, he would be there. He broke into my house. There was a restraining order from the cops because he broke into my house and pulled a knife on me and himself in front of our child. And yet I wasn't telling anybody about this. And then there was the pressure of my job, because at the highest level of sport, it's like, it's very political. There's a lot of pressure. People get fired. And so I was dealing with all of this internally, very masculinely, just do the things, trying to be mom, dad, and everything for my child. And yet anyone who saw me would think that I was very high functioning, very high performing. And yet behind the scenes, I was exhausted. I was, I guess, depressed and didn't know it. I didn't have anything I was really looking forward to. I was always looking over my shoulder and had a level of stress that I think that I was simply accustomed to based on my childhood, based on other experiences that I had. So I didn't understand in my late 20s, I didn't understand that what I was experiencing was very unhealthy and very not normal. If I saw it in someone else, whether it was an athlete I was working with or an executive, a high performing client, I knew something was off and could see it for them, but I couldn't see it for myself. And this is where my doctor was saying, you need to find something you're looking forward to. Otherwise, the next time I see you, I'll be prescribing something for you. And I didn't want that. And so I started to actively find ways to deal with my own happiness. And I don't think I was very good at it initially because I wasn't practiced at it. I was
Yeah.
very practiced at getting things done. I was very practiced at surviving. I was very practiced at taking care of my child, but I was not practiced at taking care of my own fulfillment and my own happiness. And one thing that happened, thankfully, there was the restraining order, but ultimately my ex decided to move away because he couldn't handle being in the same city that I was in. And that gave me breathing room. And that was very helpful. And it gave me the space to do the things I wanted to do. I ended up leaving my salaried position, opening my own business. I ended up taking on more private clients versus high performance athletes. I opened a facility that was 6,000 square feet and ran my business. And eventually I fell in love with the love of my life, who I'm now married to.
That's
And
amazing.
my life had turned into exactly everything I had hoped for. I looked at some of the things that I had wanted and written on maybe dream lists. I wanted to live in a foreign country at various times. I wanted to own a certain car. I wanted to run my own business. And I was doing these things. At some point, I had somebody managing my business. I moved to Turkey where my husband was.
Wow.
My daughter with me. So my daughter got to experience living in Turkey. And when we came back to Canada, we blended our family. And I had no idea what I was about to face
Mm,
in terms of, I call it the tornado. If people who are listening haven't felt the feeling of being stalked, haven't felt the feeling of being really down or being depressed, chances are people have felt the feeling of being so overwhelmed and in survival mode that
yeah.
they literally don't know if or when they're going to come out of it. And I stepped in 2010 into a decade of what I call the tornado, because in a matter of 6 months, my husband retired from professional volleyball.
Mhm.
We moved back to Canada. We moved my business and my home across Canada to where he was from so that we could blend our family, because he had 3 boys from a previous marriage. I had my daughter, and we wanted a child together. And so we thought that would happen in Turkey, where I had a little more freedom and I had someone managing my business. But it happened when we were moving back from Turkey. So in a 6-month span of time, we made 3 moves from across the world to then across the country.
Mhm.
We reopened my business in a new city, blended our family, got married, and had a baby
Oh my
in a span
gosh.
of 6 months. And then
Ugh.
what happened, and this is what I didn't foresee, because I believed at the time that A, I could do anything I set my mind to, but B, I then believed, well, I have the most amazing partner.
Mhm.
So all the things I did before, like starting a business by myself, being a single mom, well, now I have a partner. So all those things will be easier.
Yeah.
Silly me. Silly me.
Yeah. Well, before we get to all of that, let's do a little unpacking of what you had or said earlier on the show is the fact that you were always this go-getter, this type A personality. And, when someone experiences abuse in their early childhood, you could become very type A. I know I did because I wanted someone to see me. I wanted to be validated. I wanted to be, give that accolades, that love and attention. If you're not receiving it at home, you're going to try your best to be the best student, be the best athlete, be the best. And when you're always on fight or flight and you don't know the difference, and you experience like what you experienced, a troubled relationship, and you're just doing, you don't really recognize until someone else points it out that this isn't normal, right?
Yeah.
That this isn't normal to always feel on high alert, on high anxiety. And like you said earlier, it's easy for you to point it out on someone, but it's
Yeah.
harder to recognize it in yourself, especially if you've always operated on fight or flight or high anxiety, high achieving. Being an overachiever is a good thing, but can also be something that is a root cause of something else, right? So
Mhm.
it's nice to sit there and think, yes, I'm an overachiever, it's great. But if you're not happy and you're experiencing all these different, like, I wonder what questions she asked you to her for her to analyze that you were depressed. Do you remember the questions or no?
They were a standardized depression questionnaire that most GPs would utilize, and they were simply are you looking forward to anything? Are you sleep? Are you feeling tired, or do you feel like you want to sleep more? It was things like that, pretty basic questions that when they're stacked or accumulated, you look at them and go, but
Yeah, you're like,
but
I am depressed. Yeah.
yeah, but truly I truly resonate with how you're describing people who have had trauma, myself included, in that there's nothing wrong with being an achiever. There's nothing wrong with being an overachiever. It really comes down to when someone's overperforming,
Hmm.
when someone's overperforming unconsciously, then that overperforming unconsciously is typically coming from patterned behaviors in order to, like you say, seek validation, seek approval when it wasn't there, or when you're trying so hard to be loved when maybe
Hmm.
that love wasn't freely given. And for a child's brain, when their brain is forming, don't have context. And
Hmm.
so what's normal or what isn't normal, I remember when I was a kid, I remember realizing that, oh, this isn't what happens in other households, because I would go and visit friends' households, because what was normal to me wasn't happening in that household or that household or that household. And so I started to then have some comparables. But when your brain is developing, that's when what I've been told it's referred to as complex PTSD,
Yeah.
because your brain literally just as a little kid forming this sponge of information just doesn't have an understanding of what's occurring versus that might be healthy versus unhealthy, or normal versus not normal. It actually becomes their normal. And I think that's what then creates a tolerance of high levels of stress, or an endurance of high levels of stress. Not that that's a good thing,
Yeah.
uh, that then becomes too much in the long haul. Back in 2010, I suddenly in by 2011, January of 2011, I had a newborn,
Hmm.
and I had an 11-year-old, and I had a 10-year-old stepson and two 8-year-old stepsons.
Wow.
And I had a business baby, because I moved the business, and I thought, well, my business is established, but when you
Hmm.
move your business to another city, it's a brand new business, especially when I knew no one. I didn't have any friends in the city that we moved to. I didn't have any family in the city we moved to other than my mother-in-law, who didn't like me. And then my husband, who I thought was my amazing partner, my husband had a massive identity crisis, didn't know what to do with himself. And so he buried himself in tasks around the house, but then it was up to me to earn. So for 3 years, I was the primary breadwinner, and with this blended family and a new baby. And I love my husband so much, and I was such an overachiever that I just would find a way, find a way,
Hmm.
find a way to keep that business going, pay my people, work with my clients. My clients became my friends, because I really didn't have a friendship community. And the clients that I would get close with weren't really friends, because I would never allow myself to be vulnerable with them, because I was their coach in some form or
Yeah.
another. And so if I was their performance coach or mindset coach or physical coach, then even though I felt very close with them, I wouldn't open up unpack my
Yeah.
suitcase in front of them, because I was there for them. And it ended up leading to me getting I'd start to get physical ailments that I never had before. I might get pneumonia, or when my baby was young, I had, a burst eardrum, just
Oh.
awful infections, and just things that would never have happened. And I It's like, I was always a healthy person. I guess it's the kids. I guess it's getting exposed to more germs. And then, over time, there's challenges in my marriage. My marriage is just struggling because I've been trying to overperform for both of us and do the heavy lifting in the marriage. And then by the time 2020 hits, I'm noticing I go through menopause. By the time I'm 47, I start noticing other physical symptoms. My marriage is in trouble, just downright in trouble. And as of 2023, at the very beginning of this year, I get diagnosed with Graves' disease.
Oh my goodness.
And it's an autoimmune disease. But I learned so much and have been learning so much because I chose to heal it naturally. I chose not to go on the really heavy meds. And I have the identity as a high performer. I have the identity of being in the top 1 percentile in physical fitness, in activity, in mindset coaching. So I coach executives. I coach leadership. I, have all this physical expertise coming from high performance sport. So to have my identity just be wiped out from underneath me, in that's not who you are anymore. You can't even walk for 10 minutes. You can't sit up in a car. You have to lie down. You can't, go to the bathroom normally. You can't eat normally. Like everything, my whole world was thrown upside down. And it had me start to understand that through couples therapy, through EMDR, through a shaman, I basically went, okay, if I'm going to be an overachiever, I'm going to be an overachiever in what my needs are, in receiving, in feminine, in all of the things. And patience, being an overachiever in patience, being an overachiever in a conscious overachiever in deep understanding and grace and love. So, I've done a lot of work for 23 years since my first daughter was born to not replicate the patterns that I experienced as a child. However, what I didn't know was that compartmentalizing the things that happened and just performing, and then compartmentalizing other things that happened, because my life was just a series of traumas.
Yeah.
But I didn't see them as that. I just saw them as, oh, I have to deal with this and set it aside. I have to deal with this and set it aside. My way of dealing with it was setting aside, because there was no one else to parent my daughter. There was no one else to take care of my whole blended family of 7 humans when my husband wasn't earning. There was no one else to parent 5 children in a blended family and be the main communicator with my husband's ex-wife, my stepson's mother, and run the business and pay the bills and do all the things. And so I just kept compartmentalizing something that was traumatic because so many humans were depending on me, or I thought that was the case. And I think it was the case. However, now my body has basically said enough. And it said that my immune system has said, you've been so stressed for so long, chronically in a traumatized state, that now we cannot differentiate between a real attacker and my own body. So it starts attacking itself. And that's where the Graves' disease comes in. And what it truly means is doing the deeper work of any of the things that are re-triggering any traumas, including my marriage, doing the deeper work of truly healing any of the things that were simply compartmentalized and set aside, doing the deeper work of finding a way to communicate what I can't and won't tolerate anymore. So if there's any form of minimizing, any form of disrespect, any form of not being heard, then finding a way to functionally communicate that's loving to myself and loving to other people. And that's where the grace and the love and the healing and the patience and understanding is being done right now in order to put something in remission that I'm not willing to medicate and ignore and compartmentalize like I have. I
Before.
mean, I was never a medicator, but I can't just set it aside like I did all the other things.
Yeah,
Now
because your
it's
body
time
is
to
like, no,
do
you're
it.
going to pay attention to me now, you know?
Mhm.
And I think earlier we were talking about how the doctor diagnosed you with depression. When you were talking about what you were doing with your life and where you were career wise, it's like such a great example of how we could look at someone and think they have their whole life together. They're just living the dream and they have their whole life together. But you really don't know what's going on behind closed doors. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I started this podcast, because before social media and before podcasting and before people had YouTube channels, we were isolated. We didn't have that social media presence where people talked openly about their mental health or about their, struggles. And so you felt like you were alone and you were isolated in your own suffering. And so to know that you basically were not only mentally alone, but you were physically alone, away from your family, away from a community that you could, bond with and tell them, this is what's going on. I need your help. You kind of put it all on your shoulders, and you
Yeah.
did, like, your whole body was like, okay, I'm going to hold on to this. I'm going to hold on to this. I'm going to hold on to this. And people don't understand depression is just, well, people should understand that depression is just you're repressing emotions. And the more that
Yes.
we repress the emotions, and the body keeps score. I say this almost every other episode. It's the reason why that book is a New York Times best-selling book, is because the body keeps score. And one
Mhm.
day that body is going to say, enough is enough. I cannot handle this dysregulated nervous system. You are not
Yeah.
taking care of yourself. You're not regulating your nervous system. You're not regulating your emotions. And like you said earlier, it doesn't understand when there is nothing
Yeah.
to fight off. And so what is it doing? It's fighting your own body.
Yeah.
And most of these autoimmune disorders are because most of the time we've spent our entire life in a dysregulated nervous system.
Yeah. It's interesting because whether it's social media followers, my clients, high performance athletes that I've worked with, they would say things to me like, how can you get sick? You're the healthiest person I know. How can you get sick? You're the most fit person I know, or things like that. And then I would say the thing that my ego didn't want to say, which is that, well, actually, I may have been eating well at the time. I may have been working out at a high level, but emotionally, my needs weren't met, and they
Yeah.
weren't met for a really long time. And that meant I had chronic PTSD and literally didn't know it. And could be so mentally expanded with a growth mindset in some aspects and so blind to what was actually occurring in my life in other aspects, because I didn't want to admit certain things about my marriage in order to protect my husband. I didn't want to admit certain things about my marriage in order to not actually tackle the question, is this marriage going to be able to last? I didn't want to admit certain things about my past because I didn't want to be seen as a victim. I didn't want to be seen as someone who was
Is
abused
weak. Yeah.
or weak or raped or any of these things. So I never talked about those things. And the way that I existed with friends or other people is that didn't happen. And so denying the origin story of my entire life was denying parts of me and repressing, as you said, repressing the emotional experiences that really needed to be processed. And
Yeah.
some of them, there's some processes that happen in EMDR therapies that, the therapist will have you rate the level of trauma of a particular experience. And some experiences that the general public might hear about, might think are extremely traumatic, to me or to the next person might not feel that traumatic because it was just so normal at the time, or has so long ago that enough time passed or enough forgiveness happened, that it doesn't feel traumatic anymore. But
Yeah.
something else in the now might feel extremely traumatic. And it might just be something like an argument, a small argument, or a comment. And that might be re-triggering from so many other things. At this point, even with Graves' disease, most people would consider the amount I do, the amount I work, the amount I accomplish in a high performance category. And now I have to love myself in order to, well, if I'm going to do that, I'm going to lie down for 2 hours and
Yeah.
meditate. If I'm going to do that, I'm going to be hugging my youngest daughter and cuddling for a while so that she gets her needs met and I feel like her cup and my cup are filled. I'm going to play. I'm going to just play some cards. If I can't do something that's physical play, and just live the life that I've continued to think that I had to accomplish a certain amount before allowing myself that gift of experiencing that play or experiencing that joy or experiencing that love or experiencing that grace, but rather experiencing all of it,
Hmm.
all of those positive things, while purposefully, consciously processing any of the remnants or any of the negative experiences that are going on in the present day or that's left over from the past traumas.
Yeah, I resonate with you so much in that because there's so many times where I catch myself on the couch and I'm with like my stepson and my husband and we're watching a movie and it's a Sunday night and I'm like in my mind start getting anxiety and stress like I should be doing this, I should be doing that, like I didn't accomplish that, I can't believe I didn't do this and I
Yeah.
have to take a breather and just
Yeah.
say it's okay to be in this moment. It's
Yes.
okay to appreciate this moment right now because I will never experience this moment again.
Yeah.
As my stepson
And
is
it's
getting older and older,
beautiful.
you start, well, especially now that he's 16, I recognize like when he was 8 and 9 and 10, it was like I was just going, 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 going to his hockey games, making sure his clothes were clean, making sure he had lunchables and you're just going, going, really not appreciating it. And
Yeah.
now he's 16 and that little boy is gone. He's
Yes.
gone. And like I remember his 16th birthday, I was bawling my eyes out because we have a pool party for him every year. And now the pool is empty and he's out, at the beach with
He
his
doesn't
friends.
want the pool
And
party. Yeah,
yeah, he doesn't want a
exactly.
pool party with his family. But it's like when we're parents, I'm not a mom myself, I'm a stepmom, but I didn't have the younger years with him, but still like 8, 9, 10, like I miss those years. And so
Yes.
when I'm sitting on the couch, like you said earlier, instead of allowing your brain or your nervous system to start telling you need to be doing something else, really sit and experience the cuddles and the moments and that, because that is what life is about. One of the things that I learned after my dad died was that he can't take his business with him. He can't take his money with him. He can't take the car with him. He can't take the house. He could only take the memories and the legacy he leaves behind. And that's the thing. It's like, yes, we should be achievers. Obviously, I'm not trying to say, never go to work. Work is important. You do have to pay the bills, but in the end, what if this is your last moment?
Yeah. What if this
What
is
if,
our last day?
right? What if this is your last day? What if this is like the last time? Like, we take all these things for granted. And I'm sure you've recognized this now that, like you said earlier, you cannot walk for more than 2 hours or you can't sit in the car. It's like we take these little things for granted, being able to sit in the car, being able to go
Mhm.
for a 2-mile walk. Now that I'm 43, I remember in my 20s, I used to dance all night long in heels. I
Mhm.
just went to go see the Barbie movie. I wore wedges and now my lower back hurts. And I'm like, what happened to me? I had to go
And
get a
my arches and my calves and
I had
my
to go get a
feet and my
chiro
toes.
appointment. And I'm like, what is going on? But it's like in my 20s, I didn't appreciate being able to dance in heels until 4 in the morning. I didn't appreciate that. And that's the thing. It's like we're so busy going to the next level, the next level. We have to achieve, 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 rather than just taking a breath and like really experiencing this moment, this present moment.
Mhm. Yes, and it's beautiful. And I when you were first saying about the cuddles on the couch and watching a movie on Sunday. I would find that Sundays would be the day that I would feel like the anxiety building and anxiety building. It's like this day of whether it was my nervous system was programmed from my parents, whether it was just feeling like everything had to be rolling on Monday, whatever it was, Sundays would eventually feel like not a great day because of all of the anticipatory anxiety of Monday coming up, or what needed to be done, or getting it done before Monday, or whatever. And it's to your point, it's a whole beautiful weekend day that it only gets to be that beautiful weekend day if we allow it to be. If we
Yeah.
turn it into a work day, then if we turn it in, and I'm not saying that work days are anxiety days or anything like that,
Yeah.
because I'm one of the luckiest humans in that I love what I do. I happen to be in a space that I'm rehabbing an entire project, an entire property in a space that I love, looking out at water, being in nature, all these beautiful things. So I'm so lucky, but I could turn this beautiful space that I get to work at, that most people holiday at, and I
Mhm.
own it, but I could turn it into the most stressful place in the world because of bringing my emotional state, because of not either allowing the negative emotions or not processing the negative emotions or not having an awareness of what my needs are in order to make sure my own cup is filled. So it's so easy for us to succumb to the patterns and be unconscious to the patterns that are making our lives so much less than what it could be, so
I
much
know.
less brilliant and joyous and just delicious that our
Mhm.
lives can be when we allow it to be, versus add these layers of clinging to the negativity that we just think is normal.
Yeah,
um,
or the anxiety and the worry and the shame and the blame, because that's the thing that comes up in the people call it the Sunday scaries, because
yeah,
you have to like, oh, did you get your laundry done? Did you get your grocery stuff done? Is your
a
food packed for
list.
the, all these
Yeah,
lists of things. And then if you don't do them, then on Monday you're shaming and blaming and feeling guilty and feeling less accomplished, or
yeah,
and
feeling behind.
yeah,
Behind what?
exactly. And
Behind who?
I know. And that's the thing, like the hustle culture and all these books that come out that says, oh, everybody's doing their hour of power in the morning. And don't get me wrong, like I do try to stick
Yeah,
to a beautiful routine. But when I don't go through the routine, or when I don't work out, or when I don't do the things, I've learned to not play the shame and game lane. I've learned to be like, you know what? It's okay, Paola. You didn't work out today. You're fine. You're not going to gain 25, 300 pounds. It's like that overwhelming, oh my god, you didn't work out, you ate this many calories, you had, you
yeah,
didn't write in your book, you blame yourself, you play the shame game.
totally. Well, and it's there's such a key distinction, and it's that, because I had a client the other day who said, and this is a high performing CEO of a finance company, just like lots going on. And he's like, how do I know if I just, when I go to watch a show or play some video games, if I just need recovery, or if I'm doing buffering or avoidance behavior from the things that are really going to serve what I want? And the distinction comes down to whether that act is feels like self-love,
Hmm.
or whether it feels like avoidance of the thing that's really self-love. Because if the thing that's really self-love is the workout, or is the doing the things that we promised our kids, or whatever it is, then that might be the act of self-love, and then the TV show might be the avoidance behavior of not dealing with the negative emotion of following through, or the determination it might take, or whatever. But if that watching the TV show is, something fun to do that's going to fill everybody's cup, you're not avoiding something else, or your body just needed a break from training all these days in a row, or you just chose to spend time with your family instead because that was going to fill your cup more, or be more of an active, like it's being conscious of it versus falling into this this numbing behavior
Mhm.
that creates more comfort instead of more real love or real joy or true pleasure versus this false pleasure of something else that is comfortable or feels good in the moment, but isn't actually true joy or true pleasure. I call it the hammock of comfort
Mm.
because it's hard to get into a hammock sometimes. It takes a little bit of pain and it's hard to get out of that hammock. But typically, at some point, we want to get out of that comfort because it's not serving us anymore.
Yeah.
The other thing is going to serve us more, and sometimes we just keep doing the thing that feels normal and feels comfortable, but it's not serving us anymore. And
Mm-mm.
that's where my body was just like, guess what, yep, you might be comfortable in stress, you might be comfortable in a level of trauma or discomfort because it's your normal, but that's not going to work for this body anymore. It's not going to work for the future of my life anymore. And I really want to say to people, because I'm sure there's so many autoimmune things going on, but I want to say that sometimes the doctor, sometimes the specialist, their go-to is going to be take this medication and here you go. And sometimes that's the best choice for a lot of people. For me, it wasn't. And I want people to know that you can heal the things that seem like they are incurable. You can heal many of the things that they say the only option. If you look up anywhere, the only option for Graves' disease are some very harsh meds.
Mm.
And I am living proof, and I've got spreadsheets because I happen to have done research and some of these things. And so I've got the tools of numbers that are showing progress,
Oh,
of
that's
numbers
amazing.
of blood work that's showing the progress, of being able to, now I can go paddling in a canoe with my daughter for 2 hours, whereas in January, I wouldn't have been able to sit and watch a movie. I couldn't sit
Oh,
up long, so it's the naturopath believes in me, my GP believes in me, but the
I believe
special
in you.
thank you. I
I
believe
believe
in
in you
me.
because I
Thank
do
you.
believe that there's for every disease, there's someone out there that has been cured of it. Someone out there that has
Mhm.
been cured of that disease. And you would be surprised to find that there is someone out there that either was miraculously cured or that they figured out, I just needed to take this tweak and do this. Every disease. I mean, there's not one that I haven't heard of someone being cured of. And it really does, like, your body, I believe source, God, the divine universe, spirit gave us all the tools and everything here to survive.
Yeah.
And there's beautiful plants and fruits and vegetables and minerals that is already here for us to survive and for us to, turn the clock back. So I
Yeah.
believe in you, and I'm you should make sure you're publishing a book about this, because I know some other people who are listening will want this knowledge that you are doing it. But yeah, it's an incredible journey that you have been on, and it's not for nothing. I know sometimes we are in the darkest nights of our soul and we think, God, why am I going through this? But one day you're going to be such a beautiful light for those people that are looking for that answer, who don't want to take that medication for Graves' disease. And it's not just the disease, it's all the underlying issues that came with the disease, of having to really face our emotions and really face like the trauma and the pain. It's hard. I know it's hard. But once you've faced the monster, once you've faced that pain and you have time to really process and really heal, it will not just heal your mental, but your mental well-being, but also your body. It will
Yes.
help your body release that negative energy stored in your body that is literally keeping score. You'll be
Yeah.
able to release it, and you'll find, like she said, she's keeping track that her numbers are actually improving.
Yeah. And the body, the challenges for the body are just a byproduct of what wasn't the heart, the nervous system, the mind didn't get when it needed.
Mm.
My little spirit as a child didn't get some of the things that it needed. And then as I try to fulfill on that as a young adult or an adult without the right tools, and don't get fully fulfilled, don't get my needs met, the body's trauma, the body's challenges, the body's dis-ease is just a byproduct of and in my case, there's lots of people who might have been eating things or not taking care of their body. But again, that's all still coming from a lack of self-love. It's not somebody ticks the box here and somebody doesn't tick the box there. It's that we all have emotional needs. And if they're not met, then we're trying to fill the void in some way or another, whether it's overworking, overtasking, overeating, overdrinking, overporning, over whatever. If our needs aren't met somewhere, we're trying to fill the void. And for me, I was filling the void with overperforming, whether it was in a professional realm or in my family. I'm overperforming and overdoing for everyone and everything, and underperforming for what my needs actually were, not even really understanding what my needs actually were. And I think that that's the case for so many people. And I really invite people to, women especially, be able to articulate what their own needs are and be able to ask themselves and answer for themselves what their needs are. What do I need right now? How
Yeah.
do I fulfill that need? We tend to be looking for those needs to be met outside of ourselves. I would love for my husband to do a whole bunch of key things and act a whole bunch of key ways in order to help my healing. And honestly, that would really accelerate things forward. But he's going to be him. He's going to do him and be however he's going to be. And if we're going to be in this together, it's going to be up to me to fulfill my needs,
Yeah.
all of them. And
Yeah.
and I would express that I love when two people or friends or family or spouses can fulfill each other's needs, but ultimately it's our responsibility, especially as women and our impact on the world. It is our responsibility to fulfill our own needs. And we just typically haven't learned how.
Yeah, exactly. Because we've been sold that story that we have to wait for Prince Charming to come save us.
Mhm.
It's so much programming that we're unraveling and all these stories that we have to unravel. But I love that you said, I would love for my husband to do that, and yes, that would be great, but he is his own person. I just listened to a podcast where Marissa Peer said, if you give the task to someone else to make you happy, then you're going to be unhappy for the rest of your life. And that's very, very true. And so many of us look for, that partner, that husband, that best friend, that kid, even your child. You're like, oh, I'll have a kid because then I'll have someone who's going to love me forever. Right?
Yeah.
You put that task on someone else, you are going to be disappointed every single time, because
Yes.
eventually that kid grows up. Eventually that husband does his own thing. Eventually, that's the way life is. You have to find peace and joy and bliss within yourself. I love that the Bible says, find the kingdom within you. It's giving us clues like the kingdom is in us, the joy, it's unlocking it. We've never really received the tools because nobody really talked about emotions and well-being, especially, a couple of years ago. It's just now becoming a thing. But one of the things I wanted to say before we wrap up this episode is that I used to think like, and because I resonate with you so much as like a type A personality, I'm a go-getter. I have to do the things. If I don't do the things, then the whole world is going to fall apart. Right.
Yeah.
And you do feel that way. You feel, if I don't do the dishes, if I don't do the laundry, if I don't get the groceries, if I don't email the teachers or whatever, if I don't drop off the lunches, or if whatever, you feel like the whole world is going to fall apart. But I've come to notice, and I've done this several times now, is I take a day off from life, like
Mhm.
just a complete day off from life. I'm very lucky that I have a stepson who goes to his mom 80% of the time. So I get to shut the day off. And, before moms who are listening and try to make the excuse, well, I don't have, they're my kids, they're full time. There is a friend that will
Yeah.
take your kids for the day. There is somebody in your family that will be able to take your kids for the day, or you can pay for a babysitter to take your kids for the
Can do
day,
a swap,
right? You
with
could do a
another parent.
swap.
Yeah.
But to be able to just take the day off, literally, and just meditate, eat your favorite foods, listen to your favorite music, and just turn off your phone. Don't check your emails. Don't answer the phone, and just spend the day journaling and healing and crying and just like allowing yourself to really just be present with you, with
Yeah.
that little girl inside of you who never got that attention. I always tell people I carry like the picture of my inner child everywhere. I have her everywhere because I want to show her that even though she was ignored when she was little, even though she wasn't given that love when she was little, that's not her anymore. It's me,
Yes.
and I get to reparent her, and I get to give her that love and the cuddles and all the things that she never got. And so if you're listening to this and you're listening to Kari's story, it's imperative that you start to give yourself that time and that space and that healing. You don't want to get to that point where you get Graves' disease or cancer or,
Mhm.
some other autoimmune disorder. Get started now. Get the
Yeah.
healing process now, because if you don't heal your mind and your spirit, your body will eventually say, It's enough. It's enough."
Mhm.
Like it'll all, like you said earlier, it will cause a dis-ease in your body. It's just the
Your
way it
body will
works.
force force a fork in the road, and then you get to choose. Do you continue down this illness road, whether it's mental illness, physical illness? Do you continue down this illness road, or do you truly make the path that you create the life that you want and truly do what your body, mind, and soul really needs?
Oh, so beautiful. Okay,
Mhm.
Kari, as we wrap up this episode, what would be your nugget of wisdom that you would like to leave the ladies who are listening, or men who are listening?
There's one that just came to me because of the title of your podcast, and when I thought of it when I saw the title of your podcast, and I just thought it just kind of dropped in my brain, and it was that it's easy to be fearless when you can forgive yourself and others, because then there's nothing to be afraid of. It's just easy to step forward into the world and not be afraid of what someone else thinks of you, what someone else is going to do or not do. It's easy to be fearless when you can have that grace for yourself and others. The other one that I used to have on my desk, it was a quote from Winston Churchill, and it's we make a living by what we get and we make a life by what we give.
Mm.
And that one has always resonated with me, so much so that when I started my business in 2005, and my daughter was 5 years old, that I knew that this was a passion project, a heart project, in that, and especially for women, we want to give, we want to help other people, we want to make a difference for other people. We're typically are up to something that serves other people. And the only way we can give our best is when we are our best. And that means giving ourselves, taking care of ourselves in the way that really fulfills our own needs. So those are just a couple of the nuggets I would impart,
Oh,
because
beautiful nuggets. I love them. I
yeah,
love them.
women are it. If I mean, I love men. I absolutely love men. I love all the humans.
Yeah.
However, research shows that women, especially groups of women, especially women in community, have very, very powerful impacts, positive impacts on communities, on groups of people. And
Yes.
so we need to take care of ourselves. And if we
Yeah.
can promote that as much as possible, I think that's very powerful. So
And
thank you for what you do.
I know the men know this. This is the reason why they're trying to divide us, and they're trying to erase us, and they're trying to make it seem like, women aren't that powerful, but we are, and we're even more powerful when we get together and when we help each other, and learn from each other. So I'm so happy you are on the podcast. Kari, how can my audience find you?
We have our website is theempowered.ca. So and then the word empowered.ca. And then I'm on Instagram. On Instagram, it is at MPWRD. So MPWRD is the empowered on Instagram. And where else are we? Facebook. You can find us on Facebook, Kari Schneider. And our podcast, we have a podcast called the Empowered Team Podcast, where ultimately our podcast is all about providing the optimization for leadership in life so that we can keep performing our best in leadership in life, because it's a big picture thing. It's not just a task. It's not just an exercise. It's not just a food. It's a big picture. It's the mindset. It's the heart. It's the soul. It's the connection.
I love it. Thank you again for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. This is a wonderful thing. Paola, you are amazing. And I
Aw.
love this podcast.
Thank you again for listening to Journey of a Fearless Female. I'm your host, Paola Rosser. If you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual mentor, you can book a free discovery call with me at www.fearlessfemale.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at fearlessfemale_coach, subscribe to my YouTube channel at fearlessfemale, or find me on TikTok. I'm under at paola.rosser. And if you love this episode, make sure you hit subscribe, share it with your friends, and leave a review. I read every single review, and I truly appreciate the time you spend writing it.